to talk about tonight, I guess, is we want to keep this sort of light, I guess, and talk about what we as individuals took to Frankfurt and got out of it, specifically on the fellowship, although it's going to spill over a little bit into the fair itself. But just, you know, it is a discreetly different experience to be a fellow. I guess we should start with maybe each of you guys could tell when you were fellows and maybe give your one takeaway.
Sure. Should I start?
Danielle, sure. Maybe give us just a little bit about what you're doing as an editor.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an editor at St. Martin's Press. I acquire a pretty crazy, slightly strange list of fiction and nonfiction. It's a little hard to pin me down. I do everything from thrillers and mysteries to serious narrative nonfiction, some humor, some pet books, the odd cookbook. It's a pretty wild mix. Anyway, I was a fellow in 2007, and for me it was an incredibly interesting experience because I moved to the United States from Germany 20 years ago. So it's almost like going back, because I was an American fellow, but I was German. So I was the U.S. fellow that year, but I had a different background. And what I took away from it mostly was meeting these 17 other fellows who I spent 2 very intense, very social weeks with. It was opening up sort of this world of opportunities and different ways of looking at programs and what can be done. And that goes all the way from how people deal with piracy in China to how many books do you publish a year by one author and what format. I mean, it's a really wide range of subjects that you get exposed to that I would never know, how they do that in India or how they do that in Spain. I mean, some of these things might be more obvious than others. But to me, it made me rethink the American publishing model a little bit in certain ways. And I think that to me is something that comes in handy ever so often when you're asked for new ideas or for new ways to do things that you can fall back on, well, how do they do this somewhere else successfully, and how do they approach these things? So that, coupled with the social aspect, was a really incredible opportunity. And as Peter said, I'm still in touch with all my fellows. Someone has a baby, someone gets promoted, someone moves jobs, we all hear about it. We have a Facebook group that we all are in together.
For your year specifically? Or for
yes, from our year, yes, we have a special group. And it's just an incredibly wonderful, it's almost like a family, because it's so intense. You spend like all these hours cooped up either on public transportation, which can be fun, or in panel discussions, meetings, or just dinners and lunches and breakfasts and things like that. You can't help but also become friends. And that's really something that to me is an incredibly wonderful opportunity to have these people who are in the same business I'm in, but you also get to know them on a much deeper level.
Yeah, I totally agree with all that. My name is Tom Mayer. I'm with W.W. Norton. We're a large independent employee-owned publishing company here in New York. I do mostly nonfiction, sort of history, culture, and the arts. I do some fiction, some graphic novels. I do some things in translation, including from German, although I don't speak German. And for me, the Frankfurt Fellowship Program gave like a 3-dimensional shot. Like if you're in publishing, you know what your company does. And I know how to publish the books that I have, the kinds of books that I do. And I know my company's profile. And I know somewhat the profile of the other companies in America, although, if you haven't worked there, you don't precisely know how they do it. So you get to see if there are other people. For example, I was with Peter the year I went in 2010. I got to see how Peter and other American companies did things. And then in another direction, I got to see how every company in Germany did things, because we really met every kind of German publisher, from the biggest Random House to the smallest, little independent who does beautiful children's books. And so I saw 15 different companies and ways of doing things, and I saw how books that I knew in America mapped to those German companies. So I saw where my books were, I saw where Random House's books were, I saw where Crown and Ballantyne's books were, where FSG's books were, and who was doing what with which. And then, in addition to those 2 dimensions, I had each of my fellows, who were another 15 sort of fonts of knowledge about their own country's way of doing things. So we'd be at, a German publishing company, and I'd say, oh, they publish Paul Krugman, for example. And somebody else would say, oh yes, well, in Spain, he's published this way, also by this other company. And so it felt like I had seen from 3 different directions how many, many different kinds of books were done. And oh, that one completely flopped in France, but it was a huge hit in the Netherlands. And why? And there was insight from everybody involved. So I think that was the most valuable thing for me, in addition to the social aspects and getting to know people and having a community. So that was very exciting.
I'm Amy Hunley. I grew up in Atlanta, and I think I had a unique experience, which is that when I went to Frankfurt on fellowship, I was going as an editor, and I've since taken on as well running our foreign rights department. So I do both, I'm like sort of agnostic, the same way that Peter is probably, or vegetarian, because I can right. And so for me, the fellowship was an invaluable preparation where we sell direct in Germany. So having, you know, experience what it's like to walk through the doors of a German publishing house that many times over through the course of that week, and then being able to take that knowledge and build on it through coming to the book fairs again in the last 5 years has been really invaluable. And I guess my big takeaway was just like, what a big deal it is to be in someone's office, and how much of a different and more deep and more nuanced experience that is than to sit with them in the Frankfurt Book Fair in a stand, which is like basically an experiment in like human sort of social engineering, like how much can you take and how much can you retain in this like speed dating kind of environment, like when every book gets boiled down to like by the end of the week you're like 15 seconds. And you lose all coherence. And to be able to kind of walk through the offices and see the books on the shelves and feel the culture in the offices, and also to meet people from not just the guy who's running the literary fiction division, but like the editors from all the different parts of moving parts of the company. You know, before I got there, for example, like we have a very long relationship with Rowohlt, which is a great German house outside of Hamburg, and they are known for being one of the best and like longest history of publishing American fiction in Germany. And so obviously like they keep up relationships with all the American publishers very well. But being in their offices, I was able to see, oh, and then they also have this like amazing list of women's commercial fiction by German authors that I would never know about because it's totally irrelevant to my professional life. But you know, you can sort of see the whole ecosystem of how the company functions and how it responds to the changes in the German market.
That's a good point. You get a different perspective when you see it for yourself versus when you're being pitched something at a table.
Yeah, and you also have the sort of serendipitous experience of like seeing a random book on a shelf and like the editor standing there, and then you can have these like, you know, you see their face light up when they talk about it.
They're all kind of house proud when you show up and they want to show you
Absolutely.
the house. Erin?
So I'm Marion Dubert. I work for FSG, which I wish I could say is an independent publisher, but it's not. It belongs to Macmillan Group, but we still try to retain an independent spirit. It's a house that does a lot of literary books, ranging from non-fiction to fiction, poetry. I am in charge of foreign rights there, and I'm also this kind of hybrid entity there. I bring in French books, I edit French books. I think that I learned a lot about German publishing, but the most important thing for me was being in close touch to all these people from so many different parts of the world. I have fellows. I have fellows that, of course, have remained dear friends, but from Mexico to Iran to Sweden and, of course, America. And so this was, I think, one of the greatest revelations for me was that we might work in different countries, we might be publishing different books, but fundamentally we're all doing the same thing. And what we know to do, we basically can transpose that in different countries, with of course the subtleties of the different markets. But I think for me, this is really what allowed me to move to America, because I realized that what I knew, what I could do it elsewhere. Germany, Spain, America, whatever. It just turned out that New York was a really cool city, so. But that's it.
Hi, I'm Paul Willett, just Scribner, and these are all incredibly salient points, and I'll try not to echo them too closely. I mean, I think for me, a very sort of big general takeaway that I had for my fellowship, which was just last year in 2011, was just that we do work in a very big global industry that has a lot of energy still. I think sometimes, you know, in the sort of last couple of years when the economy's been in a rut and you know, the digital transformation is changing things so quickly, it can kind of feel like we're in an embattled periphery industry. And going to the fellowship and then also the fair too, you realize that this really is a sort of major business that has trickled down in just countless countries across the world, and just kind of coming back from that feeling sort of re-energized, I felt like was very helpful to me as sort of a young person trying to make it in this industry. I guess more specifically, I've just been fascinated by why things become sort of global successes and why they don't for a long time. The first book I ever acquired ended up making twice as much money in foreign rights income as I paid for the advance, and that was through sort of no effort of my own. And I think it was sort of hard to figure out why something like that happens without actually going to a place where I could have a conversation with, you know, an editor from Norway and an editor from Germany and an editor from France and talk about what people like in their publishing house and by extension what people like in their country. And it's really a remarkable experience to be in close quarters with your 16 fellows, but also you know, at the meetings at the fair and in the Frankfurt Hof, and have the ability to sort of ask those kind of questions. And I think just absorbing so much collective wisdom has made me sort of a much smarter editor about looking at things, looking at the value of things beyond just the US market.